Dear listener, querido Radio Escucha, are you planning to vote in the upcoming midterm elections? We at Futuro want to hear from you. Would you consider leaving us a voice message answering this simple question? What is moving you to vote? Also, tell us which party or candidate you think will better address your concerns. Call us at 646-571-1224. Again, 646-571-1224. Dial us up on a rotary phone. Also, be sure to include your name and contact information in case we want to follow up with you. And thanks a lot. Gracias.
From Futuro Media and PRX, it's Latino Rebels Radio. I'm Julio Ricardo Varela. And yes, I'm back. I took a couple of weeks off. I was traveling a lot. So before we start, major shout out to senior editor of Latino Rebels, Hector Luis Alamo, for stepping into the host chair. Also, got to give it up to editorial director Fernanda Santos, who's been helping us plan these shows. And, of course, my fabulous producer, Oscar Fernandez, who also produces the Latino Media Collective, for just rolling with it while I was traveling. But I am back, and just want to let you know, the next couple of weeks, we're going to get into politics election mode. There might be a little palate cleanser in between. But also just want to say, we shared the Gustavo Arellano interview about the LA City Council last week. That was fire. It's still like, just go to the Latino Rebels Instagram if you want a little entertainment this week from the internets and the socials. But always thankful to have Gustavo Arellano on the show. He was also a former contributor for Latino Rebels. Known him forever. LA Times columnist. Doesn't have to say yes to us, but he does, because that's the kind of homie that he is. So I appreciate the conversation. And also, again, thankful for Hector. You will be hearing more of Hector Luis Alamo if you're a fan of the show. He will be back. So, anyway, this week, we have been wanting to feature the work out of these wonderful candidates, student journalists, however we want to put it, out of California. We've gotten these really cool reports, and they're actually relevant to the election. So we really wanted to focus on two reports that we've gotten, audio reports. And I have two fabulous guests with me. One of them is from the exciting town of Sacramento, California. You want to say hi, fabulous guest?
Hi.
And who you are and what you do?
Yes, I'm Danielle Elliott, and I'm a civil rights attorney in California.
Very good. And then also from Berkeley, do you want to introduce yourself, fabulous guest from Berkeley, California?
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for having us, Julio. My name is Celina Avalos Jaramillo, and I'm a Master of Public Policy student at the UC-Berkeley Goldman School of Public Policy.
All right. So I want to talk to both of you because I have a great friend of mine, Aaron Glantz, who connected me to the program and the work that you guys are doing and the reporting that you're doing. And I remember the email he sent me over the summer, and he's like, Julio, you need to feature some of this audio on Latino Rebels Radio. And I'm like, of course. All right, it took us about 3 or 4 months, but we're here. And I want to start just with you, Celina, first, about your story. Can you, lead us about what you reported on? Because what I want to do is feature both your stories and then talk about them. So, Celina, do you want to tease what you worked on? How's that? See what I did there? So,
sure thing.
Take it away.
So just to give some background, my colleague Lola Proctor and I's investigation essentially focused on how the insurrection on January 6th was organized online, but specifically how the people who fomented the insurrection are being prosecuted, but the platforms that enabled the insurrection have gotten scot-free. So we looked at QAnon conspiracy theories and the alternative platforms users have been migrating to, like Parler or Telegram or Truth Social, and essentially how these platforms embolden people to incite violence or insurrections.
All right, so we're going to listen to the piece that you worked with your colleagues. So Oscar, why don't we play that clip, Oscar?
We will finally hold big tech accountable, and if these people had courage and guts, they would get rid of Section 230, something that no other company, no other person in America, in the world has.
Section 230. Trump railed against this obscure 1996 law that protects internet platforms like Facebook from being sued for what their users post. Trump doesn't like the law because he thinks, erroneously, that it's what gives tech companies the power to decide who can use their platform and who can't.
All of these tech monopolies are going to abuse their power and interfere in our elections, and it has to be stopped.
But that same law, Section 230, protects Trump's ability to organize his followers. That's because Trump's followers can conspire to storm the Capitol on apps like Facebook and Parler, and the companies can't be held responsible.
Donald Trump, everything he and his supporters do is self-interested, and hypocrisy is almost, laughably irrelevant to them.
Matt Wood is with the progressive advocacy group Free Press. What's especially ironic, he says, is that now that Trump has founded his social media company, Truth Social, the law will benefit him too.
So I think he would embrace Section 230's protections when they benefit him and be happy to toss them away when he thinks they're hindering his ability to say whatever he wants without consequences.
Trump's take is actually a bipartisan stance. Democrats believe that Section 230 has allowed the internet to become a cesspool of hate speech, defamatory content, and misinformation. Here's how President Joe Biden framed the issue in a CNN town hall back in 2019.
I just think it's a little out of hand, and I, for one, think we should be considering taking away the exemption that they cannot be sued for knowingly engaged in promoting something that's not true.
But even though Trump and Biden agree on the need for reform, nothing is being done. And so, the internet remains a great place for hate speech. Tech and civil liberties lawyer Kathy Gellis says that's not a problem, though, because people with opposing views are able to debate. This is what she had to say when we asked her if Section 230 helped Trump and his supporters' ability to organize the insurrection.
I don't have any concerns about Section 230 because I know that sort of means that whatever he does, people can talk about it and complain about it and argue about it or support it if they want to, that this is a healthy ecosystem where the people will still functionally have the ability to speak freely, and including freely online.
Gellis is more concerned about a world without Section 230.
If changes happen to Section 230, then I become much more alarmed because that gives him or any political leader the tools to start pressuring the platforms and therefore pressuring the amount of speech that they can have. And chances are that is going to come down hard on the people who would like to speak against his interests.
For Gellis, Section 230 is working well. The problems on the internet are social and cultural. Hani Farid, a professor at the UC-Berkeley School of Information, thinks the free market approach doesn't work for social media. 23% of Americans, for example, use Twitter, and only the top 25% of users produce the majority of tweets. So, really, he says, 2% of the global population are making up most of a person's Twitter feed.
This is not the town square. This is basically a bunch of journalists, politicians, and famous people, in a big echo chamber, screaming at each other. This is not the town square. So let's stop pretending this is where democracy happens.
In contrast with Gellis's libertarian take on Section 230, Farid thinks regulation will make the internet a safer and more attractive place for a larger swath of people.
Right now, Twitter is a hostile environment for women, for people of color, for people from LGBTQ, from anybody with who wants to have a civil conversation. And so they have largely left. And what's left are the Elon Musks and the Alex Joneses of the world. You want diversity, you put rules of the road in place so that you can have an open and free exchange of ideas without people threatening to rape you every day, every moment that you get onto Twitter. So it's exactly the opposite of what people are saying, is that we want free expression. Free expression needs rules.
The lack of censorship makes alternative platforms popular on the right, especially from people who have been banned from those larger platforms like Facebook or Twitter. Sarah Aniano, a graduate student at Monmouth University, spends her time on apps like Telegram, Gab, and Getter researching the social media rhetoric of far-right and QAnon conspiracy theories. You may have heard of QAnon. It's a pro-Trump conspiracy that says powerful liberal politicians and celebrities are involved in a pedophile ring. After seeing the effects of QAnon on the 2020 presidential election and the Capitol riots on January 6th, she made it her mission to further understand the movement and the role social media plays in perpetrating it. And Aniano says what she's seeing on Telegram will and already has affected the 2022 elections.
I would be very concerned to be like a ballot counter going forward, because they are going to have like poll watchers. They really want people to have a stronger hand in controlling and counting the ballots, because they really do believe that the 2020 election was fraudulent. And that is not limited to QAnon. That's so many people.
As Trump potentially seeks re-election in 2024, Section 230 protections could help grow and amplify his base online. So, even though Trump's base isn't exactly expanding on Truth Social, Aniano says the platform raises questions about another January 6th.
But I think that's the big question, is will a shrinking but more ardent group of believers on a social network end up being more dangerous? Or do they really need like the manpower of mainstream social media and just the sheer reach in order to do that?
The solution, Fareed says, is pretty simple.
And so I think what 230 should do is be modified to say, if you are truly, you want to be a true town square, fine. But if you are creating products that are by design unsafe, well, then I think you have some liability, right? And I think we should have our day in court.
But right now, suing tech companies for what even the most violent posters put online is not allowed by law. That puts the ball into Congress's court, because they have the power to change Section 230.
That was reporter Celina Avalos Jaramillo, and that story was co-reported with Lola Proctor.
So, Celina, the reason why we wanted to start with you, because Section 230 is actually being considered by the Supreme Court at the beginning of October. Why do you think this matters? Like, why did you work on this? You know what I mean? It's like, why is this so important? Because give me your thoughts, Celina.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but my response is multifold. So the reason why I worked on this is because of what we found in our story. So essentially, based on the different interviews that we had with folks doing research on QAnon and also with legal and policy experts, we found that our country is in danger. Social media has allowed people to communicate like never before, but we have also seen an increasing rise in domestic terrorism, white supremacy, and the spread of mis and disinformation, most of which can be linked to online organizing. And so this leaves our democracy weaker and us as a society vulnerable to more threats against our communities.
And the bipartisanness of this, it's not as clear cut, like what you said and, what you guys reported on. I mean, it feels like big tech doesn't want this to happen. I mean, we live, Latino Rebels basically lives on the internet. I don't necessarily think that we'll get sued, but how do you explain this to people that are living on social, that are commenting on social, that it goes beyond just that? Because what you're saying in the reporting is, this led to an attempted coup, right? And it hasn't gone away.
Exactly. So for us, the way we try to explain it is, some folks are saying, well, you're advocating for more censorship online. Why? Like, what should be done? For us is that we do want free speech, but the way we see it is when somebody behaves badly online, whether it's spreading lies about the vaccine or spreading lies about the election or inciting violence online, the companies and the platforms that are hosting all of this need to be held responsible. And we need to think about what our role will be in ensuring that the online world is a safe and healthy community for us all. because essentially this is a security policy issue and it is affecting all of us, whether it's in our democracy and how fragile it is, seeing lots of lies being spread about how Joe Biden isn't president. So this is how all of this goes back to how it's affecting our communities and our everyday lives.
We're going to hold that thought because I want to kind of bring the both of you guys together at the end of the show, but I'm going to turn it over to Danielle. And Danielle, explain what you worked on, what we're going to listen to here.
Yes. So with my partner, Stephen Rascone, we investigated why parts about the big lie, sections of the big lie relating to the elections, cannot be heard anymore on television networks, but you can still find it online. And those lies especially are being spread in Spanish. And this is because Section 230 protects third-party platforms, social media networks, from being held liable for defamation suits. And so we looked into why these were particularly a problem online and how experts were trying to fix this problem.
All right. Well, that's a great explanation. So, Oscar, cue it up. Cue it up, Oscar. You're like the DJ today. Cue that clip up, Oscar.
There's a popular post on Facebook that went up right after the 2020 election. It's a photo of Trump campaign lawyer Rudy Giuliani with a smile across his face. And underneath, in Spanish, it says, "I've been told by 3 sources that Dominion's funding came from Venezuela." That statement has been debunked as a lie. It comes from another piece of disinformation that claimed that Dominion voting fixed elections for Hugo Chavez, the long-dead former president of Venezuela. But unlike the TV networks, which have retracted their coverage, the Giuliani post is still online a year and a half later. The Giuliani meme was shared by La Voz de Venezuela, a popular page full of viral videos and memes that target both the Venezuelan government and American politicians. The post has had more than 1,000 reactions since it went up on November 13th of 2020. This piece of disinformation became part of the narrative to create distrust in Dominion voting machines. It was all part of the foundation for the big lie, that the 2020 presidential election was stolen from Donald Trump. Then, about a year later...
More breaking news tonight. A Delaware judge is allowing Dominion Voting to press forward in a major defamation case against Fox News after finding the network's coverage of election fraud may have been inaccurate.
Dominion Voting traced the disinformation back to Rudy Giuliani and conservative TV networks like Fox News and OAN. And Dominion sued them all for defamation. They sued for more than $1.6 billion in damages, arguing the debunked theories spread about the company hurt its reputation. But the same post from La Voz de Venezuela, it's still up on Facebook.
Hateful content, disinformation, a lot of these narratives live up on platforms, and we just not only know they exist, but they are then amplified for more eyeballs and more engagement.
That's Nora Benavides, a civil rights attorney at Free Press, a media advocacy group. She says posts like La Voz de Venezuela are still up because of a federal law called Section 230. The law shields social media companies from defamation lawsuits for material their users post, no matter how ugly or damaging the content.
So if you post something that's horrible, social media cannot be liable for the harm. And of course, that gets back to immunities from Section 230 in the Communications Decency Act.
Even so, there's nothing stopping Facebook from flagging the post as disinformation or taking it down. Experts say a big reason it's still up and not flagged is because it's in Spanish. Laura Edelson studies disinformation at NYU.
It doesn't really appear that there has been any significant investment in tools to enforce Facebook's existing policies in Spanish.
Edelson says Spanish disinformation stays up twice as long on average as disinformation that's in English. Take popular conspiracy theories about COVID. When the COVID vaccine was introduced, a conspiracy theory went viral online. It played into the strong Catholic faith of many Latino communities. The vaccine, the post said, was the mark of the beast, and by getting it, people around the world were pledging allegiance to Satan.
Just how long those coronavirus Mark of the Beast ads stayed up in Spanish. Like those things stayed up for months and like for a really long time. I never actually saw them go down. I know that the English language versions of those ads, when you did see them, they went down very quickly.
And because of that, Spanish language disinformation stays online. In fact, there's so much of it that researchers and advocates are struggling to get a handle on it. Again, Nora Benavides of the media advocacy group Free Press.
We don't fully know the landscape of what content gets engaged with, how long is something up before it has been removed, what's happening in private groups. There's just so much that we don't know.
The combined problem of the lack of Spanish language content moderation and platforms not being liable for what gets shared on their sites creates a flood of disinformation that's difficult to track.
So disinformation is both a global problem, but it's also highly local. And together, that just means that it's so hard to define what it is or what is the problem because there's so many layers to it.
Experts like Benavides and Edelson say more transparency into how platforms deal with disinformation can offer a solution to the problem, or at least an idea of how widespread it is.
We need transparency from platforms about their practices, about the kind of algorithmic and back-end issues, how they're working, what the technology really is.
We reached out to Facebook about the post from La Voz de Venezuela and asked them what their plans were for combating Spanish disinformation. Facebook did not return our request for comment, but a post from its press room says, quote, mainstream media plays a bigger role disseminating disinformation than popularly accepted. So what Facebook is saying is that networks like Fox News and OAN are far worse than them when it comes to spreading disinformation. And while they may have a point, for traditional media outlets, there are legal consequences.
That was Danielle Elliott for Northgate Radio, and that story was co-reported by Stephen Rascon.
You know, I've written a lot about this, Danielle. Talk to me as to why it was important to focus on Spanish, because to me, it's an issue of resourcing and cultural understanding. It seems unfettered, and you know, we are in the space. Like, Latino Rebels has been around for 11 years. We've seen it all. We still see this disinformation. You report it, like, you know what I mean? Like, you're supposed to do everything right. It's like, report it to Facebook, report it to Instagram. And I feel like it's still around, right? In a lot of places. And you're not even talking about WhatsApp, because WhatsApp is part of Meta, which is part of Facebook, which is part of Instagram. You know what I mean? So, like, what's being missed, and why did you want to focus on this?
Yes. So I was, in my past life before going to law school, I was a field director for campaigns and worked with Spanish language voters and saw a lot of this disinformation firsthand. And what really bothers me is that there's a combined problem of a lack of Spanish language content moderation, investment in translation services, and generally just a dearth of cultural competency that prevents social media companies from really flagging and labeling all the disinformation in Spanish at the same rate, with the same diligence, for English language disinformation. So, for example, with the coronavirus vaccines disinformation, there was a lie that was perpetuated online a lot about, in Spanish, about coronavirus vaccines being the mark of the beast, which played into the strong Catholic faith of many Latino communities that if you got the vaccine, that you would be pledging allegiance to the devil. So there's just different cues of disinformation in Spanish that these social media companies are missing because there's not a resource investment there.
And they also kind of have admitted that. Like, I remember remember the whistleblower, that there was internal things. There was a whistleblower. Just when Meta became Meta, there was a whistleblower who said, yes, we can't track the Spanish language. Like, it's almost like they see the Spanish-speaking community as something that you don't attend to. And to me, it's like a clear threat to democracy, right? I mean, your thoughts, Danielle?
Absolutely. And when this disinformation stays up online, it creates doubt over the general election process, which has direct effects to the upcoming midterm elections as well. And since our reporting last semester, we've seen over the summer just more news reports that disinformation in Spanish is still up online. It's on YouTube. And those spread then to WhatsApp, where there's less opportunity for fact checking. And so it just is like this vicious cycle. And we don't know how long this content is up. We don't know who's seeing it. We don't know how these algorithms are working. And so experts are really calling for more transparency from these companies about the back end of all of the sharing, just so that we can understand a bit more why this is such a problem in Spanish.
Right. So Celina and Danielle, now to kind of bring you both together, that is my question. You both reported this earlier, this year. You're seeing, there's definitely reports, a lot of what you're mentioning, Danielle, like it's sort of like a given now, the misinformation in Spanish is an issue that's not being addressed in the American political system. Simple as that. I don't think anyone can dispute that. So what do you think, Celina, like your thoughts about moving forward, right? I think the problem has been identified, right? I think there's issues here that, you have these sections of speech in an analog world, and now we're in a social digital world where it's just, it's just compounded by the millions, right? Celina, like, how do we begin as an American society or just as human beings to deal with this? Because what's the big takeaway for you as we move forward? And Danielle, you can follow up right after this.
Yeah, well, for me as a public policy student, essentially our goal is to provide solutions to the ills our society faces. And based on what we saw with the interviews that we conducted, from the rise of QAnon conspiracy theories to the organizing online that contributed to the insurrection, to vaccine and election misinformation that Danielle reported on, we've seen how harmful these actions have been towards our very fragile democracy, especially as we head into the 2022 midterm elections. So we need to think about how we keep our community safe online. But this requires strong advocacy from Congress because they have the power to change Section 230.
Danielle, your thoughts? I have one last question for both of you, but any takeaways, like you said, from your reporting that you're like, it's sticking with you now, and like, what do you do as, in your future career?
I think there's a few things that can be done. First, social media companies need to do more. There's certain companies like Twitter that are active in taking down posts better than Facebook, for example, or just deleting the accounts like they deleted Donald Trump's account for a bit. So these social media companies have the responsibility to protect our democracy. They should be doing more. And second, like Celina mentioned, Congress does need to act. And you mentioned earlier that there's a case before the Supreme Court that involves Section 230, and this is Gonzalez v. Google. And that case is really about how responsible these social media companies are for when their algorithms promote illegal content. And that case is going to have large effects on Section 230 and the internet community. And it's kind of scary to see that in the hands of the court, where whatever they decide is law, and that will have massive repercussions. They will decide the legal liability without hearing from all the stakeholders. If Congress were to enact this sort of law, for example, they could hold all these hearings and learn more about the economic and social benefits of algorithms, and then weigh that and balance it with the harms. So the fact that it's in the Supreme Court means that there's less control from Congress. And really, this is because Congress hasn't taken action in the past, like however many years we've been seeing disinformation spread.
Yeah. So last question to both of you. How hopeful are you for these issues, at least impacting, the Latino community, underrepresented communities, communities that don't have access to power and voice? Danielle, why don't we start with you, and then Celina, you can give your final thoughts. But you know what I mean? It's like, how hopeful are you? Should we be really concerned, or do you feel like there's progress just by educating people?
I think that there is a lot of hope in the local community efforts that are going on. I did a lot of interviews with organizations throughout the country that are working on media literacy and helping educate Spanish language communities about these sorts of issues. And I know that there's strong advocacy within the community as well. And so I do have faith. I just want to see Congress take more action. And I want to see social media companies try harder, because Spanish language voters are the second largest language speaking population in the US. They're part of our electorate. They've been here, and they're important voters, they're important constituency. We should be recognizing that with a lot more commitment than what we're currently giving.
Celina, your final thoughts.
Yeah, well, as a Latina myself, and also as someone who has parents and family members that are Spanish-speaking folks, all of these different issues are very personal to me. And so what gives me hope is knowing that even though, when Congress doesn't step in, the community does. So like Danielle mentioned, there's advocacy groups that are doing the very important work of being on the ground and organizing and spreading information that is based on facts and data. And so I think that's what's giving me hope, knowing that at the end of the day, we have our community that's there trying to ensure that, we speak the truth. Even when Congress doesn't want to step in, our community does.
Well, Danielle Elliott and Celina Avalos, really excellent work with your colleagues and the Berkeley program that we got connected to. Just outstanding work. Danielle Elliott and Celina Avalos, thank you so much for being on Latino Rebels Radio with me today.
Thank you so much, Julio, for having us.
Thank you.
Just wanted to take a moment to highlight this excellent work. Just really thankful to Aaron Glantz for connecting Oscar and myself and the rest of the Latino Rebels editorial team to this audio reporting. The thing about a journalist, you're always learning, you're always curious, you're always trying to see how stories are reported. And it was just really cool to get these reports from these aspiring students who are really caring about the future of democracy. That's what gives me hope in this time, in these political times, that there's plenty of people out there who are questioning how we communicate. And yeah, it's kind of a two-edged sword for me, because everything that Latino Rebels has done has been built online and it's been built on social. But at the same time, to quote Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. And I do think social media companies need to step up. And, I've been writing a lot about it, and I'm just thankful for Danielle and Celina for sharing some of their thoughts. So we'll link to the program, that they're doing. I, again, just want to thank them both for being on the show. I'm back. We're going to dive in a little bit into more politics, both in the U.S. and Brazil. Like I told Oscar, we might have a little palate cleanser in between. But if you like what you heard, rate and review us. Special thanks to Oscar Fernandez, my producer, for always showing up and with a smile and punk music to keep me going. And to Fernanda Santos for being fantastic in making sure that these shows come out. And also to Hector Luis Alamo, who's just doing great work at LatinoRebels.com. We'll be back next week, and like we always do, we always close out with La Plebe en Venas Abiertas. Julio Ricardo Varela, Latino Rebels Radio. We out of here.
The opinions expressed by the guests and contributors in this podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views of Futuro Media or its employees.